Hello, everyone. A very good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much for taking time off today to attend today's webinar on the topic of understanding unannounced audits within the context of Mandatory Global Food Safety Initiative, in short, GFSI requirement. And today we have with us an audience from over 26 countries all over the world, such as from the Europe, India, as well as the APAC region as well. And my name is Ryan, and I'll be your moderator for today. So before we begin, we'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. So firstly, on the topic of connectivity, if you do experience any audio issue, we will encourage you to dial in through the phone based on the webinar ID and number available in the webinar email. And if you are not able to view the screen, we'll recommend that you re-log in again. And next, we will also strongly encourage you to ask questions through the Q&A functionality, where you will be able to send any questions or clarifications that you may have for today's webinar, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. And today, we are very happy that we have Ms. Christina Martin with us today for today's webinar. And currently, she is our Global Food Manager at Tooth Island, and she has been working in the wider food and beverage sector for over 20 years and has undertaken different roles, and she has a rich wealth of technical knowledge under her belt as well. So all in all, she is very passionate to shape the future of food safety and quality globally. So without much further ado, I will now hand over the presentation to Christina. Christina, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome all. I would say good morning, good afternoon, or probably for some of you, good night. So thank you for attending this webinar today with us. Today on the agenda, we will talk about the unannounced audits. So basically, what is the mandatory GFSI requirements, how have FSSC, BRCGS, and IFS reflected this new requirement on their standards. Then I will talk to you a little bit more about how to be audit ready. So we will have some reflections from my side, so that how you can feel that your company is ready for being audited unannounced. And then in the end, we will have some time for questions and answers. So I invite you to put your questions and then Ryan will handle them to me. To start a little bit about what is the unannounced and the requirements of GFSI, I think we all know, and we have, sorry for that. Okay. So before starting, and sorry to go before the GFSI requirement, I would like to understand a little bit about you, about your companies, and to understand if any of you or a company have already been subject to an unannounced audit. So maybe yes, maybe not yet. I think, okay, yeah. Due to this requirement, some of you will be audited in the couple of next months or year. But just to have an idea, I would like really to understand if you have been subjected and if you have attended an unannounced audit. So please put the yes or not yet, so then I can have an idea. Oh. So yesterday was, I have to say, we had run a webinar. It was different. So I see that most of you have not yet. So a big percentage of you have not yet been subjected to an announced audit. So we will go through some aspects of it. And some of you have already been. So if I go a little bit further in talking about the GFSI requirement and why we had put this requirement on. So we all know that when an audit is planned and the date is confirmed, that every employee and all the company that is involved in the manufacturing process and on the quality management system and food safety management system, everyone is informed, and we know that everyone starts to prepare. Sometimes they adjust their usual processes and ways of working, and we just make sure that we meet the requirements that we think the auditor is looking for. With the exception of the regulatory audits and the second party supplier audits, the option of unannounced food safety audits was not really widely used in the food industry. Sometimes it happens, some of the schemes have that option of having unannounced audits, but in fact, it was not really widely used, only if it was required by one of your clients. However, due to the confidence that is provided by these unannounced audits, the GFSI has decided to introduce a new requirement. And this new requirement was launched with the benchmarking version in 2020, alongside with the food safety culture 1. And this new requirement, basically what is requested is that every certified site, they will have to have at least one announced audit every 3 years. So the publication of this has impacted all the GFSI recognized standards. Today, I will talk about FSSC, BRCGS, and IFS, but it has already also impacted all the other standards which are GFSI benchmarked and recognized. So, as I said to you, in fact, this is not really a new requirement. However, due to the unfortunately pandemic that we have been going through on the past, let's say, 1 year and a half, 2 years, what happened is that the implementation was a bit delayed. So reason why I'm picking this and reason why we have seen that most of you have not yet been audit unannounced. Concerning unannounced audits, I would just like to bring to your attention a couple of benefits that it's taken out from this type of audits. We see that the unannounced audits are an opportunity to demonstrate confidence in the systems and procedures to the extent that they are subject, and they can be subject anytime to unannounced scrutiny, unannounced assessment, that it's an opportunity for the companies to adopt an audit-ready food safety culture, and we will talk about how to be audit-ready. So basically, this is really about how I can be ready for the auditor to come to my door, let's say, anytime. And the other thing is that it also improves customer confidence because it provides customers with a review of the systems, and it demonstrates that the company is ready and in good order. And I have to say, with the last crisis that we had in Europe, and not only in Europe, I think also consumers would like to understand that companies are subject to these unannounced audits and unannounced visits. So I will go through now the aspects of the different standards. Some of them are similar, but I will go in to put them through anyway, and I will go standard by standard with you. So if we talk about FSSC, really it was not really a new requirement on the sense that FSSC has applied this even before GFSI has asked for it. So they had introduced the unannounced audits since version 4. And for FSSC, initial certification audits cannot be performed unannounced. So the rule is that one surveillance audit, okay, the rule of the GFSI, one surveillance audit must be then unannounced within this 3-year period. So after you being audited the first time, you should have one surveillance audit unannounced, and then after every 3-year period. Of course, the company may voluntarily replace all the surveillance audits by unannounced visits, which is an option of the company. And also the recertification audits can be performed unannounced, but again, at the request of the organization. For BRC, the concept of, okay, as you know, the same requirement, so the concept is the same. So a minimum of one announced audit every 3 years. Again, also BRC suggests is that the very first audit, so the initial BRCGS audit at the site should be announced. However, the site can ask to have an unannounced first audit, so there is an option. And of course, for sites who receive a grade C or D, you may ask yourselves, because they have, let's say, more audits, they have audits every 6 months, if they have to have more unannounced audits, but the rule is 1. So they still have to have one unannounced audit within the period of 3 years, but of course, due to the grade, and due to the rules of BRCGS, they will receive more announced audits in between. For IFS, the announced option is mandatory at least once every third IFS certification, so one every 3 years. Again, IFS states that this option is preferably aimed to recertification assessments. IFS stop calling them an audit to start to call the visits assessments. So it's the same assessments, audits. So this option is basically for recertification assessments, but of course, like BRCGS, if the company prefers, they can do it unannounced. A specific thing is that in the case the certification cycle is interrupted where an announced assessment was due, the next certification assessment, okay, it will be again an initial assessment, it will be conducted unannounced. So if I go through now in details for FSSE, so you will be scared that most we will come to your site unannounced anytime, and it's not really like that. I will explain it to you in detail. So there is this audit, unannounced audit window, so you more or less would know when the audit comes, auditor or the auditors will come to your place. So in case of FSSE, so after the completion of the certification audit, the auditor will inform about which surveillance year the unannounced audit will take place. So once the audit is finished, the lead auditor will decide in which of the surveillance year the unannounced audit will take place, and you will be informed of that. And once you know when this unannounced audit is supposed to take place, you can inform, and you must inform the certification body in writing about what is called the blackout days. And what we mean by these blackout days, so these blackout days are the days in which no unannounced audit can be carried out, either because there is extensive maintenance activities, either because the company is not working, either because the product is not being produced. So days where the audit should not take place, so you should inform your certification body about it. And you have on that time frame or that audit window, you have up to 10 days of calendar year, which are at your disposal to basically inform the certification body. Of course, the date of unannounced audit and the plan are not be shared in advance. It's unannounced. So yes, as I told you, you have the window, but you don't have the specific date. And in some cases where there is visa restrictions that are applicable because the audit is deriving from abroad, and there is some, let's say, paperwork and restrictions in entering in some countries that is needed to be taken care of, there is the possibility to give to the organization a more, let's say, a strict time window, and this is previewed by the FSSE. So what happens if you refuse to participate in the unannounced audits? So what is important for you to understand is that your certificate will be suspended immediately. And in case of FSSE, because okay, it's a 3-year cycle, in the case the unannounced audit is not carried out within a 6 months time frame from the audit refusal, then the certificate will be withdrawn. So it is suspended. There is a time of period that you can have your unannounced audit, but in case this not happen, then the certificate will be withdrawn. So when does this audit take place? So this audit takes place during normal operational hours, including the night shifts. If an auditor which has done the certification audit knows about your operation hours, if you have night shifts, if it's needed. So this will take time during the normal time. So the auditor will not go there at the time which you are not operating. And the most important thing, and this is a specific requirement for FSSC and for other standards, is that the audit should start, of course, with an opening meeting, but is required that within 1 hour. For FSSC, it's required that within 1 hour after the arrival of the auditor on site, he will have to start the inspection of the production facilities. So the auditor will arrive on site. You will have an opening meeting. You will see some aspects, what's going on, what are the products, what is being produced, what is working, which lines are working or not, who is present, who is the deputies. And then they have to go within 1 hour to the shop floor, because that is, let's say, the surprise element of the unannounced audits. Keep in mind that all scheme requirements should be assessed. So all the requirements of a normal announced audit should be assessed. And if for some reason they cannot be completed, then a follow-up audit will be scheduled within the next 4 weeks. In case there is an audit of a separate head office, which is controlling the food safety management system process, then this audit can be performed announced. However, if in the end the head office is sitting on the same area, on the same site, then where is the production area, then this audit can be unannounced. In the case of secondary sites, off-site sites, and off-site storage, warehouses, and distributions, it is stated by FSSC that this audit, so everything which is included on the scope of the management system, this should be done unannounced. So this is a requirement for FSSC. So if we look about how we deliver audits, so normally we deliver audits on site. That has been the practice that we always knew. So unannounced audits can be done on site. However, and that is, let's say, something which was not really new, but more introduced with the COVID pandemic, is that we can also use what FSSC called the ICT audit approach. Some other schemes call it the blended or the partial remote audit. So you can use also this, let's say, audit delivery method to perform unannounced audits. The main difference is that if you are using, let's say, the blended remote, the blended audits, is that the on-site part is the part which is done first. So the surprise auditor goes on site and announced, and then he has to complete the rest, which is, let's say, the remote part has been to be completed within a maximum period of 48 hours after closing the on-site part. There is an exception in terms of the delivery method for FSSC, which is that unannounced audits might be conducted as a full remote audit. So we see less and less these cases, but in case there is no possibility to do an on-site audit or a blended, if there is no possibility to go definitely to on-site, either by country rules, either by the factory rules, there is this possibility to do the full remote audit. But as you can imagine, the ICT or these information and communication technology tools, they need to be tested to make sure it is working. And this can be done in the 48 hours window, and of course, prior to the start of the audit. So before the unannounced audit, there is, let's say, a test that must be done to make sure that everything is up and running, and it's possible to visit the shop floor remotely, and that is possible to conduct and to achieve the audit objectives remotely. Of course, this option needs to be agreed much beforehand with the organization, and it remains subject to everything that has been set and laid down for this type of audits, which is laid down on an addendum that you can find on the FSSC website, which is the full remote addendum. Just keep in mind, just as a reminder, that in case of this full remote option, this is not GFSI recognized. So if now we move to BRC GS. So for all the benchmarked standards, they also had to introduce this requirement from GFSI. But apart from what is written on the standards themselves, BRC has also issued a position statement and a protocol for unannounced audits, which is the BRCGS 079, where there is a lots of details, and I'm not going through all of them, where you have a lots of details about how to perform these audits and information that needs to be given to the certification body and all that. So how you know when is your audit window? So within the 3 months after the last audit, the certification body should discuss with you what are the options and notify in which year you will receive an unannounced audit. Of course, again, the dates will not be shared in advance. And the time window or the audit time window is that the unannounced audit can occur anytime within the last 4 months of the certification cycle, including the 28 days before the audit due date. So if you see your audit today, let's say the window for the unannounced audit is the 4 months before or prior to the audit due date that is written on the certificate. Again, and to make sure that the auditor does not go on site and you are not producing, you have maintenance, okay. You have, even if it's closed because you had holidays, you must inform the certification body in writing at least 4 weeks before, let's say, this famous unannounced assessment time window with these 4 months. So 4 weeks before the 4 months, you have to inform your certification body in writing about the non-audit days and respective reasons. So in case of BRCGS, they don't call it blackout days, they call it non-audit days, but okay, the concept is the same. And you have to inform about the days and respective reasons. Please keep in mind that just because someone is on holidays, it is not a good reason. And the CB can reject that, let's say, reasons that you are sending, and they might consider that they are not, let's say, justifiable that way. So how many audit days, non-audit days you have is in case, let's say, of a normal 1 year audit schedule, you have 10 days. But for the companies which are grade C or D, they have 6 months audit schedule, so they only have 5 days that they can use as non-audit days. Again, if a site refuses to participate in the unannounced audit, the certificate will be suspended immediately, and the certificate will remain suspended until a new unannounced audit can be completed, which will occur in the next 4 months after the audit refusal. Again, no surprises and no many difference on it is that the audit will take place during the normal operational hours, including, again, night shifts if needed. The difference in here is that for BRCGS, it is really stated that the auditor should go to the production facilities and start the audit on the shop floor or the production facilities within 30 minutes after the arrival of the auditor on site. So FSSC said 1 hour max, and then BRCGS says 30 minutes. So mainly what you have to retain is that after, let's say, an opening meeting to do a couple of aspects, basically the auditor has to go and start the visit of the production facilities. So just keep in mind that the BRCGS standards, they require that the most senior production or operation manager to be present at the opening and closing meeting. Of course, it is understandable if some managers are absent on the day. Okay, it's unannounced, nobody can be there always waiting for the auditors. However, what is really important is that deputies need to be nominated. So The fact that they are not there, it's okay, but it's not okay that there is no nominated deputy, or if the deputy is not available. Again, keep in mind that the fact that your technical manager or your quality manager for some reason is away on the day of the audit, it is not acceptable that you refuse to be audited, because it is expected that this is something normal, and that there is always a deputy and there is someone to cover for managers in their absence. So this is not really a reason for not being able to perform an audit. So also a little bit more of details in terms of let's say the unannounced audit on site. So if for some reason, despite the fact that you have given the non-audit days or the blackout days, and okay, for some reason you are not producing, there was a change last minute, there was a request from a customer, okay, whatever, and you are not producing what is included on the scope of the certification, there is a possibility that the audit is reorganized, and that the auditor reorganized the audit plan, so that initially they will start in terms of documentation records. However, of course, as you can imagine, once the production starts, then the remainder of the auditor will be focused on production and good manufacturing practices. However, you have to keep in mind that if there is no production through the entire duration of the unannounced audit, and keep in mind that the durations of the unannounced audits are exactly the same duration of an announced audit, meaning if it's 2 days, 3 days, 1 day and a half is exactly the same. So the duration does not change. So if for some reason there is no production which is expected during the entire duration of the audit, it will not possible to be completed the audit, and a further unannounced audit will be arranged. We will not know, but it will be done. In case of head office, BRCGS specifies that the head office needs to be audited prior to the audits of the individual production sites, and it can be completely as an announced audit. So basically, they state that only the production site audits need to be unannounced. In the case a site needs an extension to a scope of audit, which is separate from the scheduled annual audit, because you have a new process, or either because you have a new product, you can complete, let's say, this scope extension as an announced audit, despite the fact that you are doing an unannounced audit on that year. So for scope extensions, it can be announced. So if I move now to IFS, which is basically the one that there is not really much changes. One of the main changes is the time window. So a little bit different from BRC. So in here you have 16 weeks, which is the 4 months again, before the assessment due date, but you have 2 weeks after the assessment due date. So the window is -6 weeks plus 2 weeks. So a little bit different from BRCGS. And this is what we consider that is your unannounced assessment for your time window. And how do you know when you're going to be unannounced? So at the final of an audit, an assessment, during the final result, the company will be informed by the CB, by the auditor, if the next assessment will be done unannounced or not. So you will know in advance, and of course you know the time window by knowing your due date of the audit due date. Just to help and to make it easier in terms of the calculations, you can find on the IFS website, you can find, let's say, a calculator tool, an audit calculator tool, which is available on the website. As I said, it's public and you can use, where you just put your due date that is on your certificate, and then you can do the calculations and you can see when is your, let's say, time window. And again, like the other standards, there is also the possibility to have a blackout period and on audit days. And you have to inform again your certification body in writing 4 weeks in advance before this this unannounced assessment time window. And you have similar, you have 10 operational days when the production site might not be available for the assessment. And the change in here is that with these 10 operational days can be split into a maximum of 3 periods. You cannot put, let's say, one every, one every week, meaning, so you have 3 periods which you can use. And again, if a site refuses to participate in the unannounced audit, the certificate, it will be suspended within 2 working days, and the site will remain suspended until a new announced audit will be completed on site. So this is in terms of the IFS rules. For the assessment of the head office or central management, it should always take place before the unannounced assessment time window. So it's like this minus 16 weeks. So this part of the assessment of head office or central management should always take before the production and should be performed before this time window starts. When the head office and central management is assessed through an announced assessment, which can be an option if you are on, let's say, a fully unannounced assessment, then if the head office and central management are as well unannounced, then it can be planned to do on the same day, okay? However, and keep in mind that the assessment should always start with the production process. Of course, for all these details, you can find more details within the standards, within the position statement for the BRCGS, and feel free to come back to us, to come back to me. You will have my email in the end. If you have, let's say, any specific question, because I have not spoken about seasonal products, I have not spoken about several things, but if you have a specific question concerning your, let's say, audit window or concerning the unannounced audit process, you can come back to me or to your certification body or to anyone of to Vrijland's organization. So I have gone through a little bit in some details about, let's say, the concept of the unannounced audits and what are the rules. And before moving ahead, I would like to understand, in your opinion, is your organization prepared for an unannounced audit? So imagine that the auditor gets into your door this morning, he knocks at the door and he says, okay, I'm here to perform an audit. Do you think it will be, you will be prepared? Yes, no, or almost? Okay, I will see that the results will come in. How do you feel if you are ready? So half of you are almost ready, and a good part of you, let's say, are ready, and a small part feels that they are not ready. So I will go through now, let's say, some aspects of how to be audit ready. It is, take this into consideration that this is not the, let's say, the only truth. So it is my views and the way you see, I see that I can share with you about to be audit ready, but of course you always know your company much better than I do, and probably you have some other ideas and some extra ideas. So how to be audit ready? And to go a little bit back, I will do some analysis about for the companies which have already been audited and announced, what have been the findings. And this audit data, what it reveals is that the most of the findings during unannounced audits, they are related with practices and behavior rather than systems, meaning it's much more related with sometimes housekeeping, with hygiene, with the way you conduct your operations during the production time, more than the system, meaning the paperwork and all that, which is one of the reasons why the audit also starts as a surprise on the shop floor. So sites that find unannounced audits more challenging are those that need to react in urgency to correct hygiene and housekeeping to address problems that are already known. So that when we just prepare everything before the auditor comes in. When compliance systems become reliant on only a few people on the organization to identify, address, and monitor issues, there is this possibility that things are forgotten, that time runs out, or that other issues are prioritized in everyday's work. So really, sometimes, not, I would call not a failure, but there is more findings when really people don't leave, let's say, food safety, and they don't leave the food safety system as their own. So definitely being prepared for unannounced audits is very much related with what we call food safety culture, which is another requirement from GFSI, which was just introduced also in 2020. So both of them come hand in hand. And I always pick this picture because I think apart from the brands, you have to remind that your culture is your brand. And the real challenge to being audit ready every day is creating a consistent culture of engagement where all employees proactively identify, address, and monitor food safety issues so that compliance becomes an habit and is not something that is done on the lead up to an external audit. Is when you really live, this is called the culture, when you really are engaged. And when we said about all employees, it's really important that top management, so all managers, everyone in the organization is involved. They know this concept of unannounced audits, and the engagement needs to come top down, bottom up. So the engagement is for all the organization. So we are not targeting management. The fact that we start on the shop floor auditing is not that we're targeting the people who are on the line. There is no targets. And don't get me wrong, but the objective of these unannounced audits is not to find non-conformities. It is to make sure that your company is ready and that your practices are the same anytime. So I will give you some tips about examine and resolve the gaps, and it's something that is not or it should not be done once. It's something that you should do over and over again. And it's, let's say, the system is dynamic. Even if you prepare today, you have to keep continuing to prepare. So, so if we go one by one, so look at and identify your repeat issues. Identical issues raised over a number of internal or external audits or clients audits are likely to be the same that will be highlighted during an unannounced audit. So have a look and see that probably there is a couple of things that are always and over again identified, and most probably this will be the things that will also be identified during the unannounced audit. In case, let's say you have a new area, don't get me wrong, if you have not done, any internal audit, and if you have not history, have a deep look at it as well, despite the fact that you don't have repeated issues. Do a root cause analysis. So this is something that is very much well known in other industries, and there is a lot of techniques to perform this famous root cause analysis. I'm sure that you know a couple of them. There is the 5 whys, the fishbone. It's okay, so lots of techniques to use it. And the important is that you analyze these repeated issues, and no matter how big or small, so even if they are small things, but they have been repeated, don't get me wrong, they might come a big thing. So look at them and identify what it is the root cause. So what are the different codes that contribute to that deviation? And of course, this process might need to be repeated several times so that you can really understand what is the underlying cause, which is what we so-called the root cause. So meaning why this happened, and why let's say, why the operator on the line did not clean, why he didn't know what to clean. If he did clean, it was not clean. Does he know the concept? Does he know what are the standards of cleaning? So do several whys to try to find this root cause. And then in terms of remove, let's say, this root cause, maybe is useful that you do a systematic approach, and then you put some, let's say, priority in terms of risk, and then you prioritize the different causes so that you can start to go, let's say, for the high risk one and go to tackle all of them. It might be useful as well. So the key reason for repeated compliance issues, especially those relating to hygiene and housekeeping, and I think this is nothing new for you, is that the immediate correction sometimes that we do does not address the underlying cause for the issue. For instance, an example which it's very well known is that in terms of hygiene and housekeeping, we just put another check on the inspection criteria, but we don't engage the employees which are on the line, which are doing this type of cleaning, to understand what is the issue, why it is not done, or why it's not done correctly, and what is the best way, and really the reason, so that we can implement a corrective action that can prevent this issue to appear in the future. I insist a lot on this, but my experience, not only in the food industry, show me that this looks like a very simple thing to do, but is not such of a simple thing to do. And sometimes it is good to put a team to identify the root cause analysis, not the QA to do it himself. Involve the people which are on the line, involve maintenance colleagues, involve, several people, because sometimes, one head thinks one way, many, it can be much better. So really deep dive on this. And then also a little bit in terms of ownership. Define the ownership of all areas. Use a site map to cross-check all areas and to ensure that there is a person or a team which has responsibility for each area. And pay specific attention or particular attention to external areas, temporary storage, or any area which is undergoing building construction works. Make sure that everyone has an ownership and that everyone knows what to do. Consistent compliance. Consider if there are different food safety compliance standards across different operating conditions, meaning there is different food safety compliance or food safety standards depending on the product, depending on the day, depending on the shift of operation, depending if it's a low and peak season. Look at it and try to understand if there is a pattern. If, for instance, the night shift has, let's say, a bit more deviations in some aspects, the day shift and others, if it depends on the product, have a look at it and make sure that the compliance is consistent. Of course, you need to address the reasons why there are different type of compliance. This will help, if you identify this will help you to prioritize again where you need to focus your effort. And the ideally is that the food safety compliance standards achieved on the day of an announced audit, so when an auditor or when a client gets in, are the same one that are maintaining for the day-to-day operations. And this is really important. So you should not do anything specific just because the auditor comes in. You should do the same thing every day. And this is really an important message to pass also to all the employees, so that they know what they should do and they know what their work should be done every day independently. If there is an auditor, if there is a client, the behavior should be the same. Communicate expectations. Ensure that everyone knows what is expecting from them. And this is to all the people in the organization. Again, not only the people which are working on the line, but also managers. So it must be clear in terms of expecting the expectations in terms of, let's say, food safety. And for instance, for hygiene and housekeeping, sometimes is good to take, let's say, some photos and show people what is the acceptable standard, or say what good looks like, and then what is the non-acceptable conditions. And sometimes this clear visual, it is easier to help people, because sometimes my concept of hygiene might not be the same concept of my colleague. So to explain them what is expected, to show them, is much easier, and it has, let's say, less confusion. Very much important is recognize and reward people. Introduce a program that encourages employees to put an extra effort to achieve and maintain high standards of hygiene, housekeeper, high standards of compliance, that people are recognized for the work and for the good work that they do. This is also a way to enhance your safety culture. And of course, it rewards positive behaviors, which is, always good. So challenge practices and systems. So look at the corrections that you have implemented and ask yourself, were they efficient? Did they really tackle the root cause? Did it happen again? Maybe by fixing sometimes one thing, we create a problem in another area. So have a deep dive on it and try to see if everything is really working well. And if you have created another problem, then try, of course, for sure, to address it. And last but not least, mock unannounced audits. This is really important that you do it. So first, because you prepare your colleagues for the day that it really happens, so it's nothing new. And without the auditor present, you can give foster employee confidence, and also in contributing to the audit process. So rehearsal with them. Rehearsal these mock announced audits, but okay, when I say mock and unannounced, meaning that you appear as unannounced, only you know, not only for, let's say, people which are on the production line, but also for management. Keep in mind that issues that are identified in the mock audit, of course, they should be rectified also using the root cause analysis. And for sure, maybe you can expect that this will be what happens during a real unannounced audit. And the other thing is that about the paperwork, make sure that you are organized and that all the policies, all procedures, and all supporting information, it is in place, it is accessible, it is organized, and everyone that participates in the audit, including the deputies, they know where everything is. So, as Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but an habit. So this is something that comes normally and is not, let's say, instated just for the days of the audit. So prioritizing a food safety culture will be the most effective tool for you to build a confidence and to shift from a basic to best practice, and to provide the confidence that the organization is ready for an audit any day and every day. So with this, I pass to you, Ryan. Maybe there is some questions
Yes, thank you very much, Christina, for the really interesting insight and explaining to our audience about the details of unannounced audit to achieve food safety. So I think during the course of the presentation, we have received some interesting questions. So let me first start off with the first question. So I think the first question goes, what happens if it is not possible to conduct the unannounced audit at the production line? What are the consequences, and what can we do to prevent this?
Okay, so a very good question. And okay, as I said, so in all the standards, the very first thing that happens is that your certificate is suspended, okay, with all the implications that this has. Your certificate is suspended. Apart from it, of course, depending on the contract that you have with the certification body, keep in mind that the certification body has engaged the auditor, which has expenses, which has travel expenses. So you will also have costs that you have incurred if you cannot do the unannounced audit. So what I want everyone to remind is that you have these blackout days, non-audit days. And my advice to avoid one of these situations is that you really use them and you wisely use them. So that you make sure that everything is going through plan, and that the auditor does not go there and there is no production. So use these dates to inform the certification body / directly the auditor where you cannot come on site. It is important. Of course, there is always, as I said before, some adjustments. That it is important that you use this. So these are the 10 days that you have, and you know what is your audit time window. So it's not that you will come through 1 year, through 2 years, and you never know when the auditor is coming in. So the audit time window is kind of, let's say, defined. So use it and put the 10 days. Another piece of advice is to have more than one person who can work with the auditor and participate in the audit, meaning that if the problem is not the production, but is because people are not on site, make sure that you have deputies. Make sure that management is aware and is well prepared, and make sure that there is deputies and everyone is prepared to do it. So the rule is like avoid that this happens, because this has some, let's say, negative impacts to your organization, to your company. So to avoid this, take the best of these days and definitely try to get everyone prepared to do it.
Yes, thank you very much, Christina. So basically, I think we need the entire team to be very prepared for any unannounced audit that may happen at the premise. Yeah. And then let's move on to the next question. So is the unannounced audit focusing only on hygienes and housekeeping requirements, or is there any other requirement that such audit focuses on?
Okay, so no, it's not focused on hygiene and housekeeping requirements. I think we get this idea because we said that auditor needs to go to the production facilities in between 30 minutes, 1 hour after arriving on site. So, but this is related with the element of surprise. So, and to ensure the integrity of an announced audit process. It would not make any sense that the auditor sits, let's say, in the room looking at the procedures and records, and then gives the time for the people to prepare to the audit. So the surprise element is also related, or let's say, put it the other way around, the fact that the person goes directly to the production is related with this element of surprise. But nevertheless, all the requirements of the different certification programs must be assessed. So including, documents, records, so everything needs to be assessed like on a normal announced audit. The fact that they start on the shop floor does not mean that all the requirements will not be done. Then there is a more focus on hygiene and housekeeping, but everything will be assessed like a normal announced audit.
Okay, thank you, Christina. So let's move on to the third question. Can the audit actually take place anytime after the previous audit, or there's no such requirement?
No, as I said, and to make it, let's say, it's less stressful, it was decided that there is this so-called time window. So meaning that, let's say, the interval of time where you can be audited. So it depends on the different certification programs. And for instance, for BRC, which I have in mind, it's 4 months prior to the audit due date. So they look at the certificate, so know when is this time window. So it's not, let's say, the 12 months or the 6, it is the 4 months before the due date. So there is a specific time window to expect the unannounced audit, despite the fact that you should not know and you should not be informed of the specific date.
All right. So we have a fourth question. So for this audience, his or her company is already currently under the fully unannounced audit program. So with the new development, is there any applicable changes that we need to take note of?
No, so for the companies that have opted already for this fully unannounced program, either for the BRC, either for the IFS, so there is really no changes. So there was an option, and they continue to have unannounced audits like they have all the time. What happens is that for some reason, because this is a voluntary option, if for some reason the company decides to come out of this unannounced audit program and it goes on announced audit program, then the requirements will apply, meaning the GFSI requirements that you will have to have one audit every 3 years, which is unannounced.
All right. So we have a fifth question coming in as well. So with regards to the non-auditing days, are public holidays and site holidays included as part of the calculation?
No, the days when the factory is really not operating, like public holidays or any site holidays, they are not included on these 10 days that can be given to the certification body. You just have to inform which is these days, but then you have extra 10 days to justify because of operations or no productions, or even a visit of a customer can be, let's say, a good reason if you already know that you will have a customer visiting you.
All right. So I think we have one more question here. Can the certification body actually challenge the non-audit days?
Yes. So in fact, you have to give the reasons of why you put these, let's say, non-audit days, these blackout dates. So in case there is, in case the CB considers that there is not really appropriate, it is, he might refuse. Of course, they will communicate with you, but they might refuse, let's say, the reason, and they might consider that is not justifiable, or that is not, for instance, if you tell me that I cannot have it because person XYZ is on, let's say, on holidays, then this is not a justifiable reason. Okay.
All right. So we have one more relevant question coming in from the Q&A segment. So I think there is a question on whether we need to have a person in contact for every shift available on site 24/7. And is it correct that the facility must always establish a protocol for them to follow through the unannounced audit so that there will be no confusion and communications are clear throughout all the stakeholders in the company?
Let me see if I understand, and I'm looking at the question. So it's a very to have a point per shift of on site. The facility protocol for them. Sorry, I'm reading.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, and sorry for that. So I would say it is always important that you have, let's say, a person appointed per shift. And of course, available on site. Don't get me wrong, I don't know a lot of auditors that start and go to the company in the middle of the night, but it's important that people understand, because the shifts change normally, and these people might be on the night, these people might be on the day, if I'm not mistaken. So it's important that you involve different people and that they know exactly what is the behavior, how to conduct, where are the documents, who they have to talk to, if they have to call management. So I think it's important to put this in place, because this, and to rehearsal this, because people will feel much more comfortable on the situation. So it's not a mandatory, it's an advice that I can give to you, is that you prepare all your colleagues, okay, if you want to call it a protocol, to define, so communications are clear, everyone knows what to do, and people don't get stressed, because I think what we need to avoid is that the stress of the people when they see the auditor arriving, because for me, that's the worst thing. People sometimes are really well prepared, but they're just getting stressed. So get this protocol, get appointed persons, and okay, if you wanted to do per shift, I would say it's a very good idea. And then just make sure that they know what to do, and that, again, that you mock the unannounced audits.
All right, thank you, Christina. So I think that's one last question. I will rephrase the question a little bit into something that's more generic. So we understand that this webinar is about unannounced audits for the food industry. Does this concept of unannounced audit applies to other industry as well, or this is something that is unique to the food industry?
To be very honest, I cannot, let's say, be completely transparent, because I don't know. I think it applies for different industries. Probably also for the medical one. I don't know, because okay, I'm very much focused on food, and I've always been working on food. The thing is that the requirement as GFSI requirement is just for the food standards, and just for the ones that are benchmarked by GFSI. So a standard which is not the GFSI benchmark might not apply. I know that there is a lot of, let's say, customers that are implementing, and even yesterday, okay, it was related with food, but even yesterday I realized that sometimes some specific customers implement unannounced programs, meaning they request their suppliers to be audited unannounced. So this might be the case, but to be very honest, I cannot, let's say for sure that it is applicable to other industries.
All right. Thank you very much, Christina. So I think that's the end of the Q&A, and thank you very much for going through all the questions with the audience. So right now we have come to the end of the session, and I would like to say thank you to all the audience who have stayed with us throughout the webinar, and we hope that you find this webinar useful for your organization. So on the screen right now, we have Ms. Christina's contact details, including her email address. So if you have any further questions on food testing and also on unannounced audit, do feel free to touch base with her. And also at the end of today's webinar, we will appreciate very much if you can complete our survey form to let us know what are the topics which will interest you for our future webinar series. And once again, on behalf of the Truth Violent team, thank you very much for attending today's webinar, and we wish everyone a great day ahead. So thank you very much, and goodbye, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.